All right, so now please join me in welcoming our next presenter, Cynthia Beck, and her topic, Wellbeing and Farm Productivity. Cynthia is a registered psychologist providing mental health services and psychological assessment in rural Saskatchewan. She proudly volunteers as a director for the Canadian Western Agribition and for the Sask Ag Matters Mental Health Network. Cynthia is an active advocate for mental health in agriculture. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Hi, folks. So I'm one of those people who move around a lot, so I'm not going to be standing at the podium. I'm also one of those people who, if you have a question, I want you to ask the question at the time that you have it. Please don't wait until the end of the presentation. There's research out there that identifies that people will do one of two things when they have a question and they're listening to a presentation or doing learning of some kind. Your brain will think, okay, this question is super important, I have to hang on to it. And while your brain hangs on to that question, it filters off all the other information that you're supposed to be taking in. Or your brain will recognize that the information that's coming at you is more important and you will forget the question. So we don't want either of those things happening here today. There are 2 floor microphones. So if you have a question, you can either stick your hand up and then I'll stop talking. Because I do have that ability, even though you might think oh my gosh, this lady talks nonstop. And then just go to a microphone if you're comfortable. If you're not comfortable, I will try going down to the floor to you and I will announce, or I will repeat your question. Everybody got that? Oh, good. You're not sleeping. Sometimes after you eat a meal and it's oh, I just need to have a nap. Let's see if I've got this. So, I'm going to ask you to yell out stuff if you're comfortable during this thing. So on your farm or your operation or your ranch, what would you say is your most important asset? Family. Family, okay. Anybody else? Mental health. Mental health, okay. Anybody else? Your husband. Okay. You're the first person to ever say that, and I've been doing this for 10 years asking that question. That's great. Anybody else? You, yeah. So I'd just like to share this. When I first started doing talks about mental health advocacy in agriculture, which was about 10 years ago or a little more than 10 years ago, the individuals would never make it into the top 5 of their priority list. They would talk about their machinery or their cattle or hired hands or their children, but they never ever talked about themselves. But I'd like to point this out. On any given day, depending on the type of operation that you have, look at the productivity that is required from you or the people that you have on your farm. You're a veterinarian or a nutritionist to maintain your herd health, and you can go through that entire list. A business manager, an agronomist, an accountant, marketing and salesperson, a therapist to maintain your farm-family relationships, and then you're, of course, the laborer who does all the work. So yeah, you're the greatest asset to your operation, and so are the family members or employees who work with you. But how many times when somebody says, how are things, do you just kind of say good and keep on going? Am I the only one who does that? There are some other people, right? So how often, when somebody says to you, how are you? Do you even stop for a moment to think about how you are? Or is it out of habit that we just say good and we keep on going, right? Or we say this one, it's fine, I'm fine. Even though you could be barely hanging on by your fingernails, right? And I think that that's something that we often try to convince ourselves. How many times have you told yourself, it's okay, everything is fine, I'm gonna get through this? Well, yes, you will, But there may be times where that's not the most effective strategy for managing what we have going on. So in order to talk about well-being, I think that we need to know what that means, because, it's a fad. I'll call it a fad right now, talking about well-being or mental health, especially in agriculture. But it's more than a fad, it's really incredibly important. But in order to talk about it, we have to know what it means. And I don't ever assume that people have the same understanding of what I'm talking about as what I do. So well-being, it's the state of being well or doing well in life. The Oxford English Dictionary has the word happy in there. And I know a lot of people who have a lot of difficulty with the word happy. So I've changed that. And I've done editorial content on Oxford English Dictionary. And I've changed it to being content, right? The feeling of contentment. Healthy, prosperous condition, moral or physical welfare of a person or community. The agriculture community, I think that we do very well in supporting one another, especially in times of need. Would you agree with that? Yes, okay, good. Whoops. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way here. Mental health, what does that mean? Well, your mental health includes your emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how you think, act, decision-making. It influences how you handle stress, participate in relationships, communicate, and make decisions. So, as a human being, does that kind of sum up, all of us? If you think about how we operate in the world, that's kind of every part of being an agriculture producer, right? On our farm, I can tell you that when we're sorting cattle, there are definitely emotions involved. So those pieces, for the mental health piece, is really, really important. There are quite a few times, though, where I've had producers say to me, when I start speaking at something like this, there may be people who stand up and leave. And so afterwards, I had somebody come to me and say, I didn't need to listen to you because I don't deal with that. And I said, you don't deal with what? And he said, well, mental health, I don't deal with that. So I'd like to point this out. If you're not dealing with mental health, or you're not dealing with your physical health, that means that you're dead. It kind of goes hand in hand. Mental health is a continuum, right? Okay, so I got to look at which one. So I want you to think of it as being on a sliding scale. So if my mental health was way down here, or if my physical health was way down here on that end, then that means that I'm not doing very well, okay? So physical health-wise, if I was way down on this end, I might be so unwell that I can't get out of bed in the morning. I can't go do the chores. I can't go, check crops. I can't do the things required in my daily life to be successful or to be productive, okay? So here's one end of the continuum. And then if I was way up here, I might have the physical health of if somebody came to me and said, okay, Cynthia, you have to run in a marathon tomorrow. Well, if there's a really big if there, if I was in peak physical condition, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I can run this marathon. You could probably do everything that you were required of you in your day, right? With ease, with really good physical health and really good mental health. But if you're right here, kind of in the neutral point, you can get done what you need to do in a day, right? Your physical health, well, sure, if somebody said to me, Cynthia, you need to go run a marathon, I'd probably laugh at them. And you'd pick me up with the ambulance at kilometer 2, because I'm not in that type of shape right now, right? Mental health-wise, though, I'm balanced. I can do everything I need to do, but there's still times where I deal with stress. So it fluctuates. Does that make sense? Okay, so does everybody here recognize, yes, you deal with mental health just as much as you deal with physical health. They go hand in hand. So then how do you know? Like if you were sliding, I'm gonna go back, oh that worked. So if you were sliding down, 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 how would you know that? Because it's not exactly like your brain puts up a sign and says help, okay? And if we are the type of person, when someone says, how are you? And you're like, yep, good, I'm great. Well, are you actually aware of how you were doing? So there are some visible warning signs, and quite often we recognize these warning signs in other people, okay? So how many of you have a friend or a neighbor or a producer in your area where they're always clean cut when they leave the farm, and then, you see them one time and like they come and they're kind of wearing their dirty clothes, and you think, oh well, like they didn't have time to change before they came, or they were just running in for parts. But then the next time you see them, it's really evident that they've not washed their clothes, or maybe they were clean shaven and now they have kind of straggly beard. Maybe they were kind of a joking type of person, and then suddenly they're not really joking and they're isolating. So those are all very evident warning signs, but for a lot of us, we don't know what we're looking for when someone is dealing with challenged physical health or challenged mental health. Identifying challenged physical health is quite often easy, right? Oh, hey, how'd you break your leg, right? Broken leg, obvious. But if you're dealing with challenged mental health, it's not that obvious. So typically there are changes to a person's routine, whether this is yourself, a family member, hired hand, neighbor, a friend. They might be sleeping more or less. You will see deteriorations in their hygiene, maybe their diet changes, or maybe you see a change in substance use. So you might have a neighbor or a family member where during harvest, they never ever were a person who drank alcohol with a meal in the field. And then suddenly you happen to see them, and they get out of the cab of their tractor or their combine, and you see cans, like alcohol cans, drop out of the combine. Okay, that might be an obvious sign. But chances are, it's not going to be that obvious. Sometimes there can be really, really big changes with high or low energy. Their emotions might be off, might have trouble concentrating, or people isolate. So they make excuses to not be in the community, not spend time with their family. They kind of remove themselves. Or they could engage in risky behavior. So one of the examples that I typically share, and this is something that legitimately happened within the last 5 years. I received a phone call very early in the morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning, from a producer who said, there is a semi here, like a cattle liner, and my husband is loading up all of the cows and selling them. And I said, oh, okay. Like, was this planned? And she said, no, I found out about it when I woke up this morning. And so this was in a region where they had been in a drought. They had been in a drought for about, over 5 years. And her husband, was dealing with a pile of stress, right? No grass, pastures are dried up, no water, so you had no feed, there was no straw for winter bedding. And so this producer was trying to problem solve. And overnight, when he wasn't sleeping, he had figured out that if he sold all of his cattle, that would solve all of his problems. And this was a purebred cattle operation. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it takes years to build up purebred genetics, to have excellent herd health, to have good pedigree lines, and to build up a customer base. And so at some point in time, from when the wife was kind of tidying up after supper and she went to bed, her husband had contracted a liner to come and take those cows in the morning. So that really snap decision made out of stress was a short-term solution with a lot of long-term loss, right? There was outfall from that decision. So that is one type of possibly risky behavior, but also impaired decision-making ability. When I'm speaking with adolescents, quite often when I talk about risky behavior, it includes dangerous driving, dangerous sexual practices, and dangerous substance use. And I mean, we can do that as adults too. It's not only with teenagers. And another thing that is really visible is poor animal health or farm deterioration. So this is something that veterinarians quite often talk to me about, is they'll notice that a producer kind of is no longer able to look after their herd health, or they see lots of like dead animals on the farm when they go there, or animal deterioration. So do you think that these are things that you could recognize in somebody else? Maybe. Maybe. It's a lot more difficult to recognize it in ourselves. A lot more difficult. Here are some common physical symptoms that people deal with when they might be dealing with anxiety or depression. Or it could just be a regular time of year, like calving around our place, fatigue, exhaustion, lack of motivation. You bet your butt, I'm exhausted. So is my partner. You might have muscle tightness, feeling shaky, trouble concentrating, difficulty making decisions and sleeping. All of these other things are physical symptoms that you may be experiencing challenged mental health. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read them, but I'm going to fly through these. If you want to take a picture, you can. I think they're uploaded onto the Organic Connections kind of pooled online document thing. I can talk to Carla about that. Here's some unhelpful thoughts. And how many times might you have thought, like, I can't do this? You know, when it's really stressful, we're in a drought, you might be short of water, or you might have really high sulfites in your water, and your cows are getting sick, and you just think to yourself, like, I can't do this. There's a lot of things that we think to ourselves that are really unhelpful thoughts, and it kind of creates a cycle or a spiral where our thoughts impact our decision making, which impacts our behaviors. And then there are these unhelpful behaviors. And the top one, a lot of times when I see people reading that, working excessively, they kind of go like, what? How can working excessively be unhelpful? I think in the agriculture industry, we've been taught that when the tough gets going, the going gets tough, right? We put our nose to the ground and we work harder. Am I right? Yeah. Well, sometimes the workload is our best avoidance strategy, right? Hey, like, why don't we go visit with mom and dad tonight? Oh, I can't, I gotta work. Like, I gotta check cows. Okay, well, why don't we go on a vacation? Well, I can't, because, you know, we gotta get the hay off, or we need to bring the bales in, or I need to go check the fence line, right? There is always going to be work to do, and sometimes we use that to avoid engaging in difficult conversations, or to engage in spending time with other people, or we also use it to kind of avoid thinking about making ourselves a priority and working on ourselves. Has everybody had a chance to kind of read through those? The being angry or aggressive with livestock, throwing tools. Anybody ever done that? Never. Normal, yeah. Personally speaking, I have never, ever accidentally swung my sorting stick in the direction of my husband as we're working cattle. I've never done it, yeah. We all do it. We all do it, right? So there are a lot of things that we do as producers that can either be helpful to us or it can hinder us. And it's kind of everything in moderation, right? So self-maintenance. How many people have heard of the word self-care? Yeah. So thumbs up or thumbs down, when you hear that word, like when someone says to you, oh, you need to go do some self-care, like, is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Okay. I'll be honest with you, I kind of go, like, I don't have time for self-care. Are you kidding? A bubble bath or a spa weekend? Are you nuts? That's great if you're a person who loves to do that. I'm not being critical of you. But for a lot of people, that feels impossible, and we're setting them up for failure with that expectation. So instead of calling it self-care, I call it self-maintenance, and these are the basics. Getting adequate sleep. I know there are times of the year when getting a 7 to 8 hours of sleep is impossible. But in those times, please take a nap. Like, take 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour during the day to take a nap. There is research out there identifying that for people who experience sleep deprivation, which, ta-da, farmers are like among the top of that group, if you are experiencing chronic sleep deprivation, you are at higher rates for cancer and dementia and forms of Alzheimer's. So I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just trying to inform you. Water. So water in our body is very similar to oil in our tractors. So if you never change the oil in your tractor and it runs out of oil, what happens? You blow your engine. Everything gets really, really sluggish and grindy, right? If you don't change your oil. Well, your body is the same way with water. Your brain will actually shrink. So by drinking enough water, you are providing your organs and your blood what it needs to flow smoothly, right? And your brain. So it helps you with decision making. Same thing with nutrition. I want you to think of nutrition as the diesel in your tractor, okay? So we need to fuel our body. And if you woke up in the morning and you were going fencing, and you jumped into the first vehicle that you saw when you left the house, which might be your daughter's Ford Fiesta or something, and you were going to go out and go fencing with that, how effective or productive would you be? Like 0, right? So you would never do that. You would never leave the house, hop in the first vehicle that you see, and drive to the pasture and arrive there with no posts, no plammer, no wire, no post pounder, right? Would you ever do that? No. How many people get up in the morning and just have a cup of coffee and leave the house? There's a few of us. Okay, so please fuel your body, drink the water. Self-maintenance also includes allowing your body to recover from substance use or stress. So acute stress is kind of the stress that comes at us and is life-threatening. Chronic stress is the stress that every single one of us deals with, which is the stuff that is constant. And in the farming world, that chronic stress takes a toll on us. So when we are under extended periods of chronic stress, we are more prone to increased rates of heart attack or increased rates of chronic illness. So taking a break from the farm is incredibly important, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, because quite often the moment I say that, people check out of my talk. So stick around, please. I'll tell you more. Our workload and our stress load has a direct impact on our health, and quite often we think to ourselves, well, I can't leave the farm because I have too much work to do. But would you ever try operating your tractor with 3 tires? How effective would that be? Could you go road speed on 3 tires? No. But we do that with our body all the time. So if you're tired, or you're malnourished, or you're dehydrated, all of those things impact your productivity. Sleep quality and quantity also counts, and the psychological factors too. So if you are a person who are dealing with symptoms of anxiety or depression or those other things that are mentioned, then that also impacts our productivity. and of course family life, because I'm from a multi-generational farming family. There's 3 generations on the farm right now, and we all get along 100% of the time and agree 100% of the time. No, I'm full of crap. No, we don't. And the work dynamics, right? So depending on kind of that healthy balance, all of those things are things that can be helpful to us, but they can also hinder us. Do you kind of see that? Yeah? Anybody have questions so far? I feel like I'm racing through this, but time goes fast. So please do the basic self-maintenance. Self-maintenance is not selfish. Self-neglect makes you less effective. So if you are not caring for yourself, or if somebody says to you, like, please do some self-care, or please look after yourself, self-neglect is not productive. You will not be doing the amount of work on your farm that you could be doing, and you will also not be making the decisions that are best for your operation in the long run. Get the sleep, disconnect from the stress, even by going for coffee with a friend. Coming here is the perfect example of disconnecting from the stress and disconnecting from the workload. Because do you find that when you come to these things, you feel a little bit invigorated or hopeful or optimistic when you leave? A little bit? Yeah, I see a couple people nodding. Okay. Another thing that sinks us, which can be helpful or hindering, is our expectations. So if you see the sandwich there, my husband and I are the middle of that sandwich in our multi-generational farm operation. So my mother-in-law and father-in-law are that top piece of bread, just under the olive. And then our kids and my niece and nephew are that bottom piece of the bread, right? So when you're thinking about that, the expectations that my in-laws might have, who are, thinking about eventually backing away and retiring, their expectations for the farm and for themselves on the farm are going to be very different than what my husband's and mine are, or especially the expectations of like our kids and our niece and our nephew. Another thing that sinks us is the term common sense. How many people think that? The word common sense. Like, well, why would they do that? It's just common sense. Like, are they an idiot? That's common sense. Nobody is owning that. So common sense does not exist. I know those are fighting words. Common sense does not exist. It is learning through situational exposure. Prime example, we had a new hired hand. This is probably, pre-COVID maybe. And this individual came from a ranch. So it was harvest time, and I'm not naming names, because somebody in the crowd knows my family, so I'm not naming names. Somebody told the hired hand, stay at the grain bag and watch for holes. And the hired hand was like, okay, got it, watch for holes, okay. So you know what, we're trucking grain. We take off the field and we come back, and this grain bag is split from one end to the other. And so the person who said, watch for holes, was like, swear word, swear word, swear word. What are you doing? This is common sense. Okay. Who actually was the person responsible there for the hole in the grain bag? The person who said, watch for the hole, or the person who watched for the hole? There was nothing else communicated. So the individual who said watch for the hole, it was common sense that you would know what to do if there was a hole in the grain bag. Do you get it? This person did exactly what they were told. They watched for the hole, because they didn't know what to do if they saw a hole. That was not communicated. Does that make sense? Not common sense. Common sense does not exist. It is learning through situational exposure. And that is where communication fails on the farm, especially if you have new people to your farm operation and you're trying to work with them. The other thing that gets us are the expectations around to-do lists. How many people here have to-do lists? I see a couple hands. How many people have things on their to-do list that have been on there for a week? Okay, a month, 6 months, a year. Okay, so if you have things on a list that have been there for a long time, when you look at that list and you think like, ugh, crap, like it's another year has gone by and I have not finished that. Do you feel good about that? Or do you does it make you feel kind of like crap? Sorry, I am gonna swear the odd time. So I do say crap. Sorry, Lisa. When we have things on a to-do list that are really unrealistic, we're actually setting ourselves up for failure. And the less that we can cross things off, the less dopamine that we have. And the folks who are going to be speaking to you next are actually going to talk about that. So when you have a list, I encourage you to make a ta-da list. So you make a list in the morning that is realistic, and ta-da, here's the things that I am going to do before noon. Be flexible. Like, I mean, when the heifers are out and they're standing on my deck, okay, my to-do list or ta-da list gets delayed. And I have my own swear words. So make multiple lists, okay? Throw away the list that has things on there for over a year and call that the someday list. Someday. Not to do. Someday. Because that is a day when you have capacity, you have free time, right? Set yourself up for success. Whoops, sorry. Impacts on productivity. Okay, we've talked a lot about this. Here is a 3-tired tractor. No, this is not mine. This is a friend of mine. So there's a lot of impacts on farm productivity when we're not well. Whether we had a sleepless night or we are in chronic sleep deprivation, whether you haven't drank water in the day. How many people have livestock here? Okay, there's a few. How many times have you been like sorting cattle or livestock and everyone just gets really mad and they're really rammy and your livestock are not cooperating? Okay, so I'm not the only one. Thank you for putting your hands up. Okay, so in those times, I encourage you to have water and some food, granola bars, apples, carrots, or things that are easily packed. Not usually bologna sandwiches that are squashed and warm. Those don't really work well. Take a break. Just take a moment. Drink some water. Make sure everyone drinks water. Everybody eats something. When you start managing the livestock again, they will cooperate much better because you are cooperating better with them and you're more patient. Other physical impacts when we are unwell is that we have less endurance, less energy. We increase the risk of injury to ourselves or others, and we have increased rates of illness. The mental impact, though, that mental well-being impact, we've talked a lot about that already. Overall, we have a decreased ability to handle stress. We have a decreased ability to regulate our emotions. And so when that happens, sometimes we can really impact the relationships on our farm, right? Like, how many people here have ever said something in kind of the heat of the moment? And then it might potentially do long-term damage, right? Okay. Any questions? I realize I'm kind of racing here, but I want to be on time. So how do you help yourself? That's Holly. That's my daughter's heifer, or cow now. Please do the basic self-maintenance. You've already seen this slide. If this is the only thing that you take away from here, please do. If you want to take a picture, take a picture. Drink the water. Eat the food to fuel your body. Get some sleep. Disconnect from your workload and your stress. Move your body. We might think that we do a lot of physical labor being producers, but there's certain times of year where we're not, like seeding and harvest. If you're the person in the combine or the tractor at seeding and harvest, you're probably taking in more calories than you're putting out, and we don't even realize it, right? So move your body, and move your body in a way that's different than what you do every day. So instead of, if you are a person who uses a quad to check your livestock, or you drive like a vehicle to check crops, just take a walk. Just take a walk. And I'm not saying you have to walk 8 miles or anything, but do something a little bit different. Switch up your routine. Another thing to look at is the time frame and expiration date of your stress. So I'm going to say that this is actually a human being thing and not just an agriculture folk thing, because I think that everybody does it. Quite often we are really concerned about other people's lives around us. Like, how come the neighbor can afford that new, whatever the newest combine is that I've heard about? Or how come they can afford that camper and to take that holiday, and we can't, right? Well, that's not actually your concern. Like, you're taking on somebody else's problems, and you're adding more to your stress load, right? So when you are thinking about things that have to get done, be really realistic with yourself and recognize that in the agriculture world, stress is cyclical. There's a cycle to it, right? So in my world, because I don't know what everybody else has for an operation, we used to start calving in January. So our purebreds would calve in January and February. We had a bull sale on the farm in February. Our commercials would start mid-February and end like early April. Then we went straight into seeding, and then haying, and then harvest. And then we started all over, and then we had the show season in the fall. I also was a university student, so I went back to university at an age when most people my age are actively planning retirement. So for me, I had university, graduate school, at the same time that all of this other stuff was happening, and we had kids playing hockey, which was, the rare time, not. So in order for me to help myself not feel overwhelmed, I started to recognize that my stress was not like an ocean where I was drowning all the time. It was more like waves hitting the beach or hitting the sand and then moving back, right? So the stress of the bull sale ended the night of the bull sale after I drove the last drunk person home. Okay, I can handle that. I can handle this stress until February 23rd. Or, if you're writing exams and you feel like you are inundated by exams or tax time, well, recognize that stress is going to come in a wave, and then it's going to kind of retreat for a while. And that is the cycle of stress in the world of agriculture. How many people agree with that? Is there anybody who doesn't agree with that? Do you feel like it's like nonstop stress all year long? Because you can. You're welcome to feel that way. That's how it is. Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Or what you can do to manage it. Yeah. So there are ways to break the stress cycle. Prioritize self-maintenance. I'm just checking time. Well, we're just about out. When you get a good night's sleep, when you take a break from the stress, if you have drank water, fueled your body, you will be amazed at how more capable or able you are to manage the stress. Because I think that if we feel like we are in a frenzy and we're drowning and we're having a difficult time, if we feel that way all of the time, 100% of the time, then we're sliding down, if you remember that sliding scale. So when you can maintain your body, you manage stress better with all of these other ways. Another way to break that stress cycle is reflect and be factual. Like, actually look at what you're dealing with and break it down. And write it down everything that you're dealing with. Because you may find that you have stuff on your mind that you think you have to deal with that you could actually put off until a little bit later. and kind of place it in the time frame or where it's supposed to be in the cycle. And a lot of times we stress over things that we have no control over. The weather. How many people would agree that the weather is a very stressful factor in agriculture? Yeah, for sure, for sure. We can't change it. We can't change it. So if you are spending a large amount of your brain time thinking about the weather, your brain is not being used to actually do something about things that you can control, right? Because we only have so much energy, brain energy. That's called allostatic load. If you ever want to look that up, it's spelled ALLOSTATIC, allostatic. The other thing is to be patient with yourself. Stress cycles take a really long time to break down. Like your farm or your ranch, if you think about it, it took you a really long time to get to the point that you're at today. So change takes time. Change is also happening like every moment of every day. And a lot of times we don't realize it. We do develop coping patterns and habits of how we react to stress. In the farm world, quite often we react out of anger, right? Anger is kind of the socially accepted emotion for men. And for women, it's happiness or sadness. Those are the emotionally accepted or socially accepted responses. And so a lot of times I think that we contribute to our own difficulties because of the patterns or the routines that we've developed. But it takes some time to kind of sit back and reflect on what's happening there. Has everybody had a chance to read that? Because I'm going to skip ahead because I want to get to the resources page. Please take pictures of this. These are the free mental health services that are available in Saskatchewan. And some of them are available across different areas. The Farm Stress Line, there is a Farm Stress Line in Alberta and Manitoba as well. Saskag Matters Mental Health Network, I'm the director of that. We fundraise through private donations or industry donations, and we pay for producers, their family members, and their employees to receive 6 hours of free therapy per year. And I will just roll ahead one so you can see the site. That's what it looks like. And we have a variety of counselors, and they all have an agricultural background. So you won't spend any time for your session explaining what you do because they have an understanding of it. These are free resources that are available across the country. 211 is paid for by our federal government and the United Way, and there's a provincial site. Every province and territory has that site. The Canadian Centre for Rural and Agricultural Health, I encourage you to look at that. They have a pile of resources on there. And here's just some quick takeaway. Do the self-maintenance. Please, please do the self-maintenance. Take a break from the stress. I know that that feels impossible, but even coming to something like this, you will feel refreshed, hopefully, when you get back home and you kind of step back onto the farm. And the one thing I'd like to add is please, please consider speaking to a trusted individual. Look on that Saskag Matters website if you feel that you don't have someone that you trust that you can talk to. Sometimes it only just takes chatting with someone for a bit to solve your own problems, because you kind of talk yourself into finding your own solution. Thank you very much for listening to me, folks.